You know, Mangalam, without really giving away your age, what was the first family car you guys had?
Well, why not give away my age? When I was born, I don't think cars were invented. Mankind was still walking around on horses,
And if you fast forwarded to the 70s when you actually arrived.
I wasn't born in the 70s. It was much later than that. I think the first family car was Maruti 800 or perhaps a Fiat.
Yeah, that's what you saw on the road back those days, right? But now if you step out of your homes or offices, every second car seems to be an SUV, doesn't it?
Yes, a little elephant on the road blocking the traffic, but looks very comfortable from inside, I guess.
It's only in the last few years, I guess, it's become more affordable and more popular with Indians, and this seemingly insatiable demand for SUVs in India and the opportunity that presents for car makers is what is on top of mind today. This is Mad About Markets.
All right, so let's then drive straight to the point. Let's crunch some numbers as we do here on Mad About Markets. According to Database, the global sport utility vehicle or the SUV market was valued at $35 billion in 2021. It's expected to drive all the way to $105 billion by 2029. What does that mean? A compounded average growth of nearly 15% annually for the next 7 years. So from $35 billion goes all the way up to $105 billion. But here's a deal clincher.
Yeah.
Are you an SUV person or a sedan person?
I'm always a sedan person, but like we always say, you never know.
You never know, and that's why we're friends. I'm a sedan person as well. But you know, globally, we have seen a move towards SUVs.
Yeah.
The obvious market, if you just take a look at the United States, which is the biggest SUV market in the world, 5 out of every 10 passenger vehicles are SUVs, so that's about 52%. But increasingly, we are seeing more adoption of SUVs in Europe as well, which was traditionally a sedan country, or a sedan continent, so to say. 45% in Europe is, the SUV market share versus the overall passenger vehicle market. And in China, it's 48%. But come to India, we've traditionally been a small car hatchback sort of market, but the rise of SUVs has been phenomenal, from low teens to now around 38% as of FY21. We're number 4th, but growing very fast.
That is as of FY21, and we're closing the gap with some of the larger countries because the share of SUVs in the overall passenger vehicle market, it was just about 13% when you talk about 2015, just a few years back. Now that started to grow steadily, and as of 2020, it was 29%. But cut to 2021, in just 1 year, it went from there to all the way to 38%, like Mangalam was just pointing out. And this year, the share is expected to have improved even further. Now, this is reflected in what is the growing share of SUVs in the overall car sales in India. Take Hyundai, for instance. I mean, that is one of the companies to talk about because, from 2015, when SUVs had a 9% share in their entire sales, now it accounts for almost half of the entire total. And come 2025, it gets even better because SUV sales are expected to contribute 55% to the overall sales for Hyundai, and other car makers are similarly seeing these kind of trends.
And Hyundai's launch was actually, quite well received. Well, it's that time now to welcome all our guests on the show today, and we have quite a lineup of guests. We have Shashank Srivastava, who's the Executive Director of Maruti Suzuki. We also have with us Tarun Garg, who's the Director of Sales and Marketing at Hyundai Motor India. And with us on the program, we have Gaurav Gupta, who's the Chief Commercial Officer of MG Motor India. And to sum it all, we have Bertrand Dsouza, who's the Editor-in-Chief of Overdrive India. Thanks a lot, gentlemen, for joining us. Shashank, let's come to you first. What took Maruti so long to announce a string of SUVs? You missed the initial big rally post-Creta, didn't you?
Actually, if you talk of the mid SUV segment, which is where Creta, Seltos, the Grand Vitara operates, we did introduce the S-Cross, and we were the first to do so. However, it wasn't really a pure SUV. It was a crossover vehicle, and I think the market was not prepared to accept that. So it was slightly ahead of time. So it is not as if the trend in the market was missed. It was probably the product that we brought in, that segment, did not suit the times. And as far as the entry SUV segment is concerned, there, of course, Brezza has changed the situation because it was one of the first entry SUV vehicles introduced in 2016 and has been the market leader ever since. And very recently, we had upgraded it with the new Brezza, which is also doing exceedingly well. So to answer to your point, to your question in summary, I don't think the trend was missed. In the entry SUV, I think we have been fairly successful. Brezza has been the market leader. But in mid SUV, I do admit that while the trend was not missed, but the product that we launched probably was ahead of the times.
Maruti there is one of the market leaders, but Tarun, how do you maintain your competitive edge? And this is especially tricky given that your own company Kia has been expanding in the market, sort of cannibalizing on your own share.
Look, I think the idea is to really keep on raising the benchmark. Frankly speaking, in 2015, SUVs used to contribute only 13.5% to the overall Indian auto market. And that is when we launched the Creta. And I may say with all humility that that set the ball rolling as far as SUVs in India is concerned. And if you see in 2022, 41% of the auto sales are now coming from SUVs, which is more than hatches even. Who could have imagined this to happen? As far as Hyundai is concerned, we were the market leaders in calendar year 20 as well as calendar year 21. Yes, I think, calendar year 22, so many new launches have happened. You talked about Kia and other competition as well. At the same time, if you look at Hyundai, the range keeps on going up. For example, Tucson, we were selling about 1,000 to 1,500 Tucson a year. And now the new Tucson, we already have received close to 6,000 bookings. And we are now looking at a sale of 5,000 Tucsons a year. So I think the benchmark is going up. And the advantage which Hyundai enjoys is that along with petrol, we also have a diesel and a turbo option. Then we have automatics. And they're also not only DCTs, which are raising the bar, but now we have the 8-speed 80 in diesel in Tucson. So we are trying to really raise the benchmark, which really gives the customer so many options and an access to the global technologies.
All right, you're trying to raise the benchmark. But Gaurav, coming to you now, SUVs are eating into the share of sedans and hatchbacks. How much more can the SUV market go from here? I mean, the share of UVs in passenger vehicles has actually grown to about 48%.
You see, we have to look at fundamentally why are consumers moving to SUV. We look at it at a very high level. If you see the SUV trend is there, one, because of the consumer preference of the entire stance of the vehicle or the looks of the vehicle. There is a sense of aspiration towards the body style of the SUV. And at the same time, I think the road conditions also prefer an SUV in the country as we speak. So therefore, the SUV trend, which has been seen in the last 7 to 8 years, is expected to stay. The draw definitely has been largely in the space also between the 10 to 25 lakh rupees segment, which has seen a huge growth right now. In fact, as a market overall, that is about 35% of the Indian car industry.
All right, gentlemen, hold your thoughts. Now that we've established that the SUV trend is here to stay, who is really winning the market share game? Now, in India, Maruti was one of the leading players in the market, but this was until last year because things have started to change drastically as of this year. Tata Motors is now leading this race with a close to 19% market share of the first quarter, followed by Maruti, which is about 17.4%. A close third is M&M with 16.2% of the market. Hyundai and Kia are the fourth and the fifth largest, but if you combine them, because Kia is owned by Hyundai, they emerge as the largest player, taking over from Maruti and Tata Motors, but individually, it is Tata Motors that is leading the pack. So contrary to the long-held view that India is still a small cars market, enough and more indicators here to show that there is a clear shift in consumer preference towards SUVs.
There is a clear shift, and it has been gradual as well. You and I have seen that on the roads ourselves, but there has actually been an interesting report done by CRISIL to, break this down and trace this growth. If you just take a look at the 4 phases of SUV growth, say the first one from 2002 to 2012, and that is where the UV share, we had about 11 models for sale in the segment, and that is when we had the big launches, the likes of Bolero, Innova, Scorpio, and the utility vehicle share was anywhere between 14 to 17% of the overall, market, and that is when the market actually grew moderately. The second phase that started post 2012, the big change was when we saw the names like Duster, Ertiga, EcoSport, XUV 500, all of them come by, and the idea was that SUVs didn't really have to be costly. They really had to be practical and affordable for city driving. So as a result of which the UV share from 14 to 17% jumped to around 21 odd %. Then you move on to the third phase of growth, and that started from 2016 to 2019. And the biggest reason was the launch of Creta, followed by the launch of Vitara and Brezza by Maruti itself. As a result of which, these cars, which were much favored by the audience, we saw the UV share jump from 21% to 28%. So in the three phases, it jumped from what, around 14% to 28%. It has actually doubled. And then came the big jump with launches like we had the Kia Seltos, Sonet, Hector, then Venue, etc. But Kia's entry in the market really did extremely well for everyone, and as a result of which the UV share has jumped from 28% to 48%. So from 2002 through these four phases, as we speak, we've seen the UV share jump from what, 14% to 48%.
And like you said, the huge phase of growth, that is the fourth phase of growth starting 2019, and now almost half of the market is dominated by SUVs. Shashank, let me bring you back in. What kind of SUVs will you be looking at? Entry level, mid-segment, that's the first one you've just recently launched. Or will Maruti also look to enter the premium SUV brand? And what about electric vehicles? What are your plans on that front?
Yeah, so actually we are a very customer-focused organization, and we follow what the market and sometimes lead what the consumers really want. So we did come with the, if you remember a long time back, with the Swift, which was the premium hatch at that time, the Baleno, which was also started that segment. So also there was Ertiga, the Brezza, and so on. So we will follow the market, and we have found in recent years the SUV segment has been gaining a lot of traction. In fact, over the last 3 years, it has increased from 26% to more than 40% now, and growing. So obviously, entry SUV and the mid SUV are the two segments within the SUV space which are fairly large.
So Tarun, what about you? When you guys have products in the petrol, diesel, turbo range, etc., what about Hyundai's launch pipeline in the EVs?
Look, in 2019, we launched the Kona, which was the first SUV in electric space. And this has really helped us to know the EV customer more. You would have already seen that we have announced the introduction of Ioniq 5 in India very soon. And Ioniq 5 is already the World Car of the Year, the World Design of the Year, and World Electric Car of the Year. So I, for one, is very, very excited with this. So which will mean that we will now have two vehicles in the SUV electric space. We already announced that by 2028, we will have 6 battery electric vehicles, most of which will be in the SUV space. So I think the approach is very much there. The direction is very much clear. And going forward, you will see more and more electric vehicles coming from the Hyundai brand as well in India.
All right, so 6 EV vehicle launches lined up in the near future. But let's sum that up then. What are the trends emerging in the electric vehicle space? Of course, largely we're still seeing the diesel, and more than that, the petrol variants come into the market.
Well, clearly the trend is going to be towards SUVs, MPVs, or large, longer sedans, longer than the 4-meter length. And that's essentially because while some of the manufacturers like Tata Nexon, the EV has done phenomenally well for them. What is clear to see that, to get higher range out of these, you need a larger battery pack. And those larger battery packs can only be accommodated. They will occupy a lot more space inside the vehicle. So you need a larger vehicle. And SUVs clearly are the way forward for that. SUVs or MPVs also for that matter. So what we're clearly seeing is that because of electrification, the need is to have larger vehicles. The Mercedes-Benz clearly came out earlier this year and mentioned, for instance, globally, that they would be moving away from certain body styles, which would mean the compact sedans and hatchbacks that they develop for global markets would completely go away, and they would move towards larger body lines for that matter. So this is going to be a challenge for the automotive industry unless and until batteries get denser and they're able to provide a lot more range with more compact batteries. That's not happening anytime soon.
All right, gentlemen, we've been talking about how SUVs have been eating into the share of the smaller cars, the sedans and the hatchbacks. But here's what numbers actually say to prove if or not that theory is true. Now, look at the period between FY18 and 22. Small cars production is actually halved, almost from 42 to 26. So similar is the story with large cars, now down to about 12 launches as of FY22. Whereas the utility vehicles or the SUV space, that has been growing steadily. And even after the pandemic, it has been able to come back to the kind of launches, if not higher than what we saw in the last few years. Now, within the SUVs, the cars that are being launched, there's a lot to do with the taxes that go along with these cars. So let's look at the GST differential, because that is a huge factor. Now, that depends on the body length, the fuel type, and the usage of these cars. Now, in the sub 4-meter length segment, cars with petrol engines are displacing the less than 1.2-litre engines, and that is the most popular category in India, attracting taxes of anywhere between 29 to 31%, depending on the model, whether it is petrol or diesel. Similarly, for more than 4-meter segments, the taxes range between 40 to 43%, and for the largest one, it is over 50%. So that adds a lot to the cost, and therefore the demand also is more geared towards the sub 4-meter segment, and most of the launches there also are coming. Actually, Mangalam, what are some of the key launches that viewers have to look forward to?
Well, you said FY22 had 57 launches.
Yeah.
This year so far, we've had some really successful launches. But let's talk about the launch pipeline, the stars, so to say. Pull all of them up for you. Most of them belonging to the sub 4 meters category. You have the Hyundai Ioniq, we have MG ZS EV, the electric vehicle coming in out there. The updated Hyundai Creta, because this was the one that caused the flutter in the market when it first launched. And then we also have, of course, because it's the updated Hyundai Creta, we have an updated Kia Seltos also coming in. And that's not all. We have a couple of newer players coming in too. So we have the new Honda SUV, which is likely. We have the Citroen C3 Mini SUV, the 5-door Mahindra Thar. The Thar was one of the biggest draws that we saw in the recent past with regards to the new updated launch. And Maruti Jimny, this one, I like the color on this one though.
I like the name of it.
I like the name. Well, okay, so you can buy it for the name. I'll just ride around once a while. Maruti Jimny. Talking about Maruti itself, let's ask Shashank. Shashank, how many SUVs are you planning to launch, and how much will these new SUVs contribute to your sales going ahead?
So the contribution of Maruti SUVs to Maruti sale is just around 10%, whereas in the industry it is about 41-42% currently. So if you remove the Maruti numbers, then for the competition more than 60% is SUV. So it's both an opportunity and a threat. Of course, we have to increase our percentage of the SUV. But at the same time, if we are able to do well, then 60% of the competitor sales can be affected because their SUV percentage is very large. So it's an opportunity as well. So that is as far as the percentage of sale of SUV is concerned. On the other part about the new introduction in the SUV segment, we will be introducing a couple of SUVs in this financial year. And exact details I'm not able to reveal at this moment, but clearly they will be in a space where the SUV segment itself has grown very large. So you can expect some action in the entry SUV segment with regard to that.
All right, let's take a short break now. Up next, we continue our focus on the India SUV drive. What's fueling this love affair? And
we will also take a closer look at some of the speed bumps that may slow down the SUV drive, and also, of course, look at the bigger question, and that is the love for SUV structural in nature, or will it change? Welcome back. You're watching Mad About Markets, and today we're talking about India's insatiable love for SUVs and whether this love is here to stay or is it going to be feeble. To talk more about that, let's bring in the yays and the mays as always. And Mangalam, why don't you go ahead?
The yays, and let's bring it in. There we have it. The yays and mays car comes in, and the yay door opens first because the first big yay that we have for SUVs now are they're both affordable and attractive as against the ones of the yore which were very boxy and extremely expensive.
I take your point, but Mangalam, what is the first thing a buyer asks when buying a car?
Kitna deti hai?
And that is quite low for SUVs, isn't it?
That is, I mean, as far as mileage is concerned, it is low, but the GST differential has led to an increased demand for sub 4-meter compact SUVs, which are better mileage giving than, the bigger ones, gas guzzlers.
Perhaps, but you have to take into account the fact that the share of petrol-only models is increasing, and that means consumers have to shell out more money for these SUVs because of the rising fuel costs.
They do have to shell out more money, but for the experience that an SUV provides specifically on Indian roads. Globally, they're known for off-roads, but Indian roads are as good as off-roads for these cars, and these conditions are perfect for an SUV.
But not all roads in India will be ideal for it, because a lot of times you deal with narrow roads and these big SUVs may not be the most ideal car.
And that's why you make it compact, but that's on the road. The important part is inside a car. Indians travel with big families and a lot of luggage. Maximum space in an SUV is what we like, as against, other cars which may not have as much space.
Well, maximum space and maximum comfort, but these slightly bigger SUVs you need for that kind of comfort also attract a higher GST and then again a higher cost.
There's no taking away from that, higher taxes for slightly bigger cars. But if you're looking at a smaller car, there is a fair amount of price overlap. I mean, for the same price of a smaller hatchback or a slightly medium-sized sedan, you can get an SUV. And for all the good reasons, people may choose SUVs, and they have been choosing SUVs.
Well, but SUVs are not really exempt from what the entire industry is facing, and that is the semiconductor shortage, the rising fuel prices. All of that is impacting the SUV market as well, and it doesn't help that the world is moving towards EVs, but SUVs, which are the most popular segment by far, don't have enough options yet.
That's correct. So we need to find out whether, there are enough EV options or not, and whether they are coming, and the range anxiety issues that EVs have.
Well, that is just one of the many challenges, Mangalam, but let me put that question to Shashank, because, besides the obvious ones that we've outlined so far, what do you think are the key hindrances for the growth of the SUV segment?
For the SUV segment, of course, we have to see, because SUVs, one obviously is the fuel efficiency. The SUVs don't give that sort of fuel efficiency which you find in hatches. That seems to have been overcome a little bit with the product offerings like the Grand Vitara, with the strong hybrid, the intelligent electric hybrid that we have launched, which gives excellent fuel efficiency. But I think going forward in the mid SUV segment, which has a large percentage of diesel at the moment, that would also be a hindrance, because going forward with the RD norms coming in next year, I think diesel will be a little tough to sell, and those manufacturers who have a large percentage of their sale in diesel might have that issue. So I think there are multiple challenges facing the SUV industry going forward. But at the moment, it seems to be on a roll. The last couple of years, in fact, has been really galloping, just around 26% of the market to now almost 42%. So I think challenges will come, and although SUV is in a good spot at the moment, and I would expect that since the GST rates for the 4-meter SUVs are that 28%, that could be a challenge going forward, just in case, if you have GSTs, revised upward to the other categories of SUVs.
Take your point, Shashank, out there. But now the time for the bigger question: is India's love for SUVs structural? Is it changing? Well, we do have Shashank and Tarun's takes on this. Shashank, first you go.
So it's a great question, I think, and we have also been debating this internally. I think when we look at other countries, Latin America, China, Brazil, the other European countries, we've seen SUVs gaining traction up to around that 50% mark, where they seem to level off. So rarely is there a country which has got a unipolar sort of segmentation. In other words, there will always be segments which are strong, and there will be segments which are niche. In case of India, I think it will be the hatches, which are still about 38-39% of the market, and the SUVs, which are the two large segments which we have seen in recent times. Hatches were always very large. So I think that would continue. You will see a bipolar sort of segmentation in the Indian market, with hatches being a large segment, and also because of the demography of our country and the nature of our economy. And the second part, which is the SUV part, which we expect to continue to grow from here, from about 40% that it is of the market today, to around that 50% mark in about 4 years' time. On the question of whether this trend is structural or temporary, I think there is a little bit of structure involved in this, because the preference for SUVs has also been fueled by the road conditions, where people want a larger ground clearance that SUVs offer, and a much more commanding road presence, and also a flexibility of usage of the space which SUVs allow. So I think a bit of it is design preference because the nature of consumer thinking, and that trend is accelerating as we have seen in the last few years. But I would say around that 48-50% mark, you could see in plateau and see the other segments also coming up.
Look, I would say that while the percentages are in favor of SUVs, but if you see the Indian market, the hatch or the sedan market is also substantial. So I don't think there is anything, okay, the market is finishing or such. In fact, if you see Hyundai, we launched the Verna and the Aura in the sedan space. We launched the i20 in the hatch space. So I think the market is here to stay. India, the car penetration is still in early 30s per thousand. So there's a lot of opportunity. And I believe for one that opportunities are everywhere. But yes, more launches you will see and more focus you will definitely see in the SUV space, much like the global trends where, this is very clearly available, whether it is US or Europe.
All right, Tarun, Shashank, Gaurav and Bertrand, all four of you, thank you very much for your time here on Mad About Markets. With that, we've come to an end of the show. We'll wrap this up and see you same time next week.
Drive away.